Hey, Mariner fans. Happy Monday. Hope you had a good weekend. Good to have you back here on our third episode of Monday Mojo. 11 days until April 1st, opening day. We're right around the corner, my friends. I'm Max Schwabe and here with my co-host, Christopher Soba, and producer, Evan Barron, a.k.a. E-Pup. A lot to cover today, most notably because we've got not one, but two guests on the show today. Our first guest today, and as many of you guys know, today in sports, especially in the past decade, decisions based, from MLB professional sports team are driven more and more by data, statistics, predictions. And if any of you have ever seen or read Moneyball, you'll appreciate our first guest, Jesse Smith, who serves as the director of analytics for the Mariners. Think of Jesse as the guy Jonah Hill played in Moneyball movie. I think his real life name is Paul DePodesta, is who he portrays. But Jesse is going to dive into his role on the team and the way he and his team, the Mariners, influence and impact decisions that Jerry Dipoto, Scott Service, and upper management make. Chris, what else we got?
Yeah, first thing, Max, way to pronounce that guy's last name. That's
DePodesta.
Podesta. That's well done. Well done. That's like you're on live TV, man. Jeez. Second guest, though, is going to be Joe Doyle. He's a staff writer at Lookout Landing and Prospects Live. He's a former scout, but this guy really specializes in minor league prospects. And that's a fun guy that we wanted to get on. Heard him on a podcast with Gary Hill, I believe on the Mariners Cactus League Report. And it was fun stuff he was talking about. Wanted to get him on this show to talk about similar stuff and dive a bit further into the details of what he was discussing. But yeah, all in all, excited to have these two, Jesse and Joe, on for the show today. Excited for y'all to kind of hear different viewpoint from where the Mariners are coming from, and then that's viewpoint from Jesse, because obviously he's dives into a bit of that numbers thing, and I asked him to dumb it down to us as if we were fifth graders so we could get a better understanding of really what they do. But yeah, then Joe coming up here too. Gonna be a fun listen. So yeah, Monday Mojo, recorded on a Sunday, brought to you on a Monday. Give it a listen, guys. Thanks.
Hey, Jesse, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you guys. You hear me?
Yeah, I can. How's it going, man?
Not bad. Every day is kind of the same, but at least we got Mariners games now.
Yeah. You got the game on in the background at all?
So I'm not down with the team. It was kind of like you gotta go down for the whole time or none of the time. And I got a young family and pregnant wife, so made the choice pretty simple. So I had it on radio, but
and a global pandemic on top of that.
Right. I was listening on radio, got the Paxton start in. I've heard what I needed to hear for the day.
Eight strikeouts over 4 1/3 inning, right?
Yeah.
So we like seeing from the Big Maple.
Right.
Well, Jesse, thanks for joining the show. It's good to have you on, and Chris, Evan, and I have a lot of questions about your work, and a lot of it obviously relating to the Moneyball concept. But why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you and the Mariners bring to the organization?
Sure. About me, I joined the team in 2011 as an intern. It was a different time back then. There was no analytics department exactly. We had someone who was pretty good at SQL, but the Mariners were a little behind the curve. I was actually a huge Oakland A's fan, like classic Moneyball. I grew up in the Bay Area, and then when I read the book and realized that they were in fact special, that really took things to the next level. But yeah, I joined as an intern, got an opportunity from the then AGM Jeff Kingston, who's now with the Dodgers, and brought me in to do, I was hired because I was doing some pitching projections. So I had a nice proof of concept that they knew I could hit the ground running and be a contributor. And really right place, right time. Earned the trust of Jack Zarenzik and the leadership group, and
right.
They slowly but surely allowed me to have more influence and start hiring people. And now we have a large analytics department. You know, it kind of depends how you define it, but it's certainly an above average size group. I've had the pleasure of being involved in hiring most of them. We do a lot of stuff that I didn't know anything about when I started, but obviously the technology and the tools have changed rapidly over a decade. What I was able to do in college versus what a college kid might be able to do now are just light years apart. But yeah, we do everything. The calendar, it's cyclical depending on the calendar. Like, my passion has always been player evaluation, like particularly just hunting for prospects, but that's not all of it, right? It's also just assisting information throughout the organization, whether that's your scouts, player development. Obviously, that's huge. It's making information accessible to coaches and players. So not only providing really good information that might be, you know, predictive or descriptive, but also getting buy-in for that information is just as important. So we have our hands in a lot of pools.
Yeah. And Chris has a question on that in just a moment on kind of like the departments in which, you know, at this point report up to you, at which point you then, you know, report it internally to Jerry, to Scott. I mean, on the topic of what you had mentioned about, you know, things are rapidly shifting in the game of baseball and transitioning to this school of thought on how to win more ball games based, you know, specifically on data and statistics, right? I mean, it's got to be a constantly evolving market, right? Like, I'm sure you're picking up on new ways of, I mean, even today, right? Like this concept, I feel like has been around for about a decade now, but I can imagine that you're still picking up on new ways of understanding the game of baseball and understanding what brings wins and what, you know, what gets teams into the playoffs. I'm curious what, you know, if it's still kind of a learning process for you and your team.
Definitely. I think it's a microcosm for life in general, wherein if someone looks back at what their thought process was a year or two earlier, you're always like, what was I thinking? You know, I can't believe that was my thought process. As time goes on, you know, it's not just that there's new information, but you're also exposed to repetitions. You learn from your mistakes. You see players evolve from, you know, international or high school prospects, and now I'm old enough to see them not only be in the major leagues, but perhaps be exiting from the major leagues. Man, I don't know. That's a broad answer. I think there's probably a lot of different ways I could go with it, but yeah, I mean, I'm learning all the time. I think I always think that my player evaluation skills are, you know, year over year change a lot. And a lot of that's just, it's a lot of different types of expertise. One person can't conquer them all. And as you have those conversations and work with people in meaningful ways, you sort of slowly develop that nuance.
So kind of off of what you're saying there, Jesse, for one person can't conquer all the areas, right? Now I was looking and I mean, you in your department, you got analysts for, you know, the pitcher's focus, you got a catcher's focus and the offensive approach focus. But the one that really caught my eye was the holistic approach and how you have someone dedicated to you know, focusing on the holistic side of things. I mean, that's something I feel like has got to be extremely hard to measure in terms of, you know, the characteristics, the type of person somebody is. I mean, what goes into that side of the analytic side of looking into the team and into the players?
Yeah, it's funny because holistic was, not that it's the wrong word in this case, but was a word that we were using several years ago as just like, we want to have an approach that is anchored in data, but is flexible enough not to be tied to it, right? But we just started using the word too much, and the players just really started to dislike it. So we're like, all right, no more holistic. But Yeah, what is that? I mean, honestly, there are a lot of things that I don't think that can be quantified very well, that I would leave for like post hoc type analysis, the human element, as it were. I think in Forrest's case, what the holistic probably refers to is that he's involved with a lot of our analytics group hiring, culture, organization of the department. So how to bring our ideas together and coalesce them and make the engine run. So maybe not exactly what you had in mind with that one.
You had mentioned kind of your interaction with the organization itself. We were reading that MLB article that you and the Mariners were discussed in and interviewed and kind of described on a surface level. I mean, what's the extent of your interaction with like Jerry or Scott? And with Jerry being a scout and a former player himself, right? He's got to have to combine those two different ways of thinking, right? The old school way, pre-Moneyball, versus the new school way of the kind of situation we're analyzing sports today. Like, what's the extent of your interaction and versus those two guys versus the players, and discussing strategy with them?
Well, Jerry, I have a lot of interaction with. The analytics department has, like I said, it has its hands in a lot of pools, and depending on who you're talking to in my department, they might be interacting more with the coaching staff, say. But for me personally, I'm much more on the player evaluation side, and usually you don't discuss those things with the players directly. So that's more of a me and Jerry thing, and assistant general manager Justin Hollander too. We have constant communication. I mean, and you know how active Jerry is. So it's a full-time job, and it's a labor of love for all of us. We're all just, I don't think you really have to pay us to do what we're doing. And it's really fun. Jerry's a really unique person, right? He's what? I think he's the only active player that's a general manager right now, or the only former player that's
right.
An active general manager, I mean to say.
Yeah.
And he has a super unique perspective. We haven't always agreed on everything over the years. No one, teams never agree on anything except for we all agreed on the Kellnick deal. But
I can see why.
Yeah, but I think that, I mean, he's had a ton of influence over me, and I like to think I've had a lot of influence on him over the years as we've sort of gelled as a unit, because he came in and I was already here. And it takes a while for someone to not only his first priority is not to meet the analysts that he's arriving at, it's to figure out what to do with the ball club and work with the team first. But over the years, we've started to get a good rapport, and he started to really buy into our systems. And it's been really cool to see everyone sort of get on the same page and get in sync with player evaluation. I think we're all better for it. And then, yeah, Scott's service, I interact plenty with Scott too. In-game strategy is big. We do a lot of advanced work. It's a huge portfolio of information that goes into the game every day, because you're all the matchups, all the positioning, all the weaknesses of the opposing hitters that are specific to each of our pitchers. So it's pages and pages of information
right.
that you need to have accessible. And then of course there's the sort of philosophical questions that come up, like lineup construction and things like that, which we talk about, but more I interact with Jerry, and then with the players, we generally just, the analysts, we'll talk with our coaches and player development, but we like to have them be the conduit to the players almost all the time. I think
right.
The only time that's not true is we do these player plan meetings every year that are customized to all of our prospects, and all of our minor leaguers, and that, sometimes it just gets too heavy there. You got to have an analyst delivering that information. And, we have some of those we have some really good communicators on our team that fortunately make it so that I don't have to do that. But it's really cool. I think it meshes really well. I'm really proud of it.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I love that. And with you, Jesse, working so close with Jerry, one thing we're trying to do on this overall podcast and our show here is to really differentiate the old style of management that the Seattle Mariners used to have and the stigma that Seattle Mariners fans have of that management. And it used to be, we don't develop a farm system. We trade these guys away and we don't grow with them within our organization. And that's obviously something Jerry has been doing the opposite of. He's been getting the pieces he wants for his puzzle, and his big philosophy, which I'm sure you have to have a pretty big part of this, is the control the zone philosophy, which he's implemented from top to bottom. And the difference from a 1-0 count to an 0-1 count, both on the pitcher side and on the batter side. And what's that whole? Could you kind of explain that to the people who ourselves, like as if we were in 5th grade, right? And we don't know much about that number side, but could you kind of walk us through how that's really taken stride?
Sure. I think I understand the question. Right. So one of Jerry's big things when he showed up, right, was this control the zone idea, which at the time I think I was skeptical of, because again, it comes back to that it's a blunt instrument versus like the nuance of analytics. But I've really come around on it as in that, simplicity is key. And controlling the zone can mean something different for different players, right? It's a broad bucket that's just talking about making good decisions, basically. For a pitcher, maybe there's also an execution element since they're initiating the interaction there. But right, the idea is that it's a sequence of events, right? And you can't really. It's glaring how hard it is to win when you don't when you're not making good decisions. You need
Absolutely.
Freak athleticism.
Yeah.
Which some teams have. There are players frankly, Robinson Cano was one of those players. He did not make efficient swing decisions, but that was part of his game. And, if you tried to ask him to change, he probably would have been a worse player. He just had that freak ability that allowed him to succeed in a different way. But, there's always going to be outliers, but for sort of your non-freak players, you have to focus on those little things. And obviously it's not as simple as throwing strike one all the time, because if they know strike one's coming down the middle of the plate as a 90-mile-an-hour fastball, then that's not going to work. But drilling that concept in, I think has been really beneficial for players just to see how meaningful that is.
Do you, in your opinion, do we have any freak players on the team as it stands, or is it pretty much all uniform, kind of like purely based on 100%? We've got a team purely based on statistics, and or do we have guys, in your own opinion, that just are those quote unquote outliers?
Right. I mean, we definitely have some of the best prospects in the game. Right. So when I say freak, it means that obviously they have some abilities that just aren't out there too much. And, I think with someone like Julio, you can say that he's at the top of the power scale. He doesn't even have as much power as he probably will have in a few years. Right. But he already clocked 115, 3 days ago.
Right. Center field.
So, but Julio is going to have to make good decisions, right? Hitting is pretty simple. You have, your ability to decide to swing. Do you make the right decision? Is it going to be a ball or a strike? Is it going to be in a zone you can handle? Can you make contact? And when you make contact, how far can you hit it? And so we know the third thing, if he makes contact, he can definitely hit it. But there aren't many hitters in the game that only have that skill. They're usually not in the major leagues. So he's either going to you need two of the three, right? Is what I'm saying. You can make bad decisions if you're still able to make contact. So that's Robinson Cano. He made bad decisions, but he was still able to make contact with anything. and he had a ton of power.
Yeah.
So Julio, in my definition, very subjective, is not a freak in that he's going to have to make good decisions because he doesn't have that crazy contact ability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we had a chance to speak with Dave Sims and on our first episode, and that was kind of like the theme of what he was talking about. And he kind of, in a less analytical sense, put it in a way that you just said. It's like, look, we have a phenomenal farm system, arguably the best in the bigs as it currently stands. But at the end of the day, what matters most is not necessarily the excitement that these players could potentially bring us, but at the end of the day, they do have to show up and they do have to make those good decisions. So it's reassuring, I guess, to hear it from yourself. But I found that fascinating.
Yeah, if I could comment on that, I did listen to that episode. That's what made me decide to come on. I was like, okay, this is pretty good.
We're off to a decent start, in our opinion.
We're building a reputation here, boys. I love it.
Yeah, you guys started with a bang. I'm impressed. I'm gonna need to hear more about the details of this operation later. But,
sure.
But yeah, no, I thought a lot of things Dave said were really insightful as usual. But it was interesting to me. A couple things, right? I thought he captured a pretty reasonable sentiment for Mariners Nation, which is that, we've been through this before, right? We've had when I started as an intern, we had a top 5 farm system that, didn't amount to much. Like maybe the players that were probably like outside of our top 5 probably ended up being the most interesting of the group, in like Seager and Paxton. Sure, I'm forgetting others, but and I think if we've been through the motions, we've seen so much disappointment, and hats off to you guys for staying big fans through it all. But it's reasonable to be skeptical, the Mariners the Mariners have lost that trust. I think
right.
We have to earn it back, and but one thing I will say that I think from my chair is very different now than was then is that we have way better information about our chances of success on some of these players. Now, I'm sure I still would have thought some of those players would have boomed that busted, but there's a lot less uncertainty, like player to player with what's going to happen now, just because we have the pitch level data, we know a lot more about like the details of their skill set. And it makes me a lot more bullish that on our chances this time, but I'm not gonna ask for too much Kool-Aid drinking. We'll let actions speak.
To kind of follow that up, we were hearing about the new kind of camera system you guys have, and you're utilizing the Simi. Is that pronouncing it right? The Simi camera. What's could you kind of walk us through how that works?
Yeah, so a few teams are using Simi or systems like that. The idea is that you're capturing sort of key markers on the body, like the elbows, et cetera. Like, mostly thinking about pitchers here, but hitters as well, in a robotic way, so that you can collect, every pitch, every swing, you've got data for that player, and you can collect and start looking for patterns in that data. And we have a couple of swing guys and a few pitching mechanics people that already know where to look, and they have some data-driven concepts of like what's important, but there's a lot that's speculative and like
right.
Until it's proven to me algorithmically, like I'm always going to be skeptical. So maybe this will be a chance to take some of those things that are intuitively insightful and actually sort of test them out empirically. Is it more if you have a pitcher with that, hits these markers, is that truly, all else equal, more predictive of injury or future growth or whatever? It's going to take us a while to find these things out. Frankly, we're just starting this process. Truly, the one thing we know we're going to do with it is generate some cool reports for our swing and pitching guys that will just help them do what they already do. But then for my crew, we don't exactly know. It's just another Pandora's box that that may bear fruit in the future. It's kind kind of my thought on it.
Yeah, I mean, one last question I had, Jesse. We're coming up on time here, and really appreciate having you. And one thing that I kind of want to get a sense of, to your knowledge, right? Given what you and your team are responsible for, would you say relative to, again, to your knowledge, right? Relative to other teams in the bigs or even professional sports as a whole, where do the Mariners sit on like adopting this new school of thought versus kind of just going with the old way of thinking, so to speak?
Right. I think this sort of came up earlier and I glossed over it too. I mean, it's really hard to say new school, old school. Even you know, elements of like the Jack Sterenzik era had some new school components that, you know, no one knows about. And there's plenty of things that, you know, like Jerry has a scouting background, a player background. Like, I don't want to say some of that makes him old school, but like, it's always a blend of things. And it's always a big blend of voices too in an organization. Where the Mariners sit is we're definitely progressive at this point. There's no question about that. Like, there's a lot of key indicators we can just look at in terms of like, you know, teams that do these things are obviously using a data-driven system to drive these decisions. Like, they may not use the exact same system we're using, but clearly they're using something really similar. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing the things they're doing, that kind of a thing. There's still a lot of teams I don't, and then, you know, over time you meet peers, other teams, you get an idea, but sort of big caveat that there's a lot of teams who I can't really speak to, but we're definitely above average. Everyone thinks they're above average, but we definitely are above average. I'm already regressing for my bias. I think, and I also think we realize that like you have to have a fast rate of growth because everyone's growing every year too. So if you are above average now, but you're content, you will be average and then below average in a few years.
100%. And kind of last question for you here, Jesse. Who in terms of excluding Jared and maybe excluding like Logan and Julio, those big name guys, who are you most excited about to kind of see continue to develop within our farm system and make their debut maybe this year or the upcoming or following year? What player sticks out in your mind?
Man, that's so tough. Let me look here. You know, like for me, the ones I'm really excited about are like the ones that just do nothing for the common fan. They're like the guys we drafted really late, but they have some like, you know, crazy what if type scenario. Yeah, let's see. I'll have a good answer here.
I believe I heard you talking in an interview about Luis Torrens.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if Torrens counts, he's a really exciting one for me. I mean, the one that's like really hyping people up right now is Trammell. I mean, that San Diego trade is just kind of smoking hot right now. We'll see what happens. You never know. But I'm really excited for him. I think that he's a great one to talk about right now, I think, because, you know, he might make the club and he's close and he's polarizing, at least from like a what kind of future is this player going to have perspective. He's not polarizing from a human perspective. He's awesome. But like, you know, huge name, big pedigree. Scouts have been on this guy forever. Like, he's got all the tools. It's always been really obvious, but it just hadn't, you know, if you look at his minor league performance, it's not Kelleneckian or Kellneckian or Julio level. It hasn't come to fruition yet. So it's tools over performance at this point. But even like team to team, I think you get different answers from everyone. Like, people are all over the map on what he's going to be, but he has these crazy raw abilities. We really believe in the human being. Like, we knew we were getting someone that was just an absolute worker and awesome person with huge tools. And we also thought that, taking it back to Jerry, that he could control the zone and in ways that maybe hadn't shown up yet. Like, he knows the ball from a strike. He didn't really find his swing yet. It's kind of our take. Like, he he was working on his swing. He didn't really have his swing, but we think he's got his swing now.
Cool.
And yeah, he's really exciting.
Well, Jesse, we're up on time here, at least the amount that Zoom has allotted to us, but wanted to say thank you for your time and a lot of good insight from you, and let's bring home a ship here pretty soon.
Yeah, hang with the team, guys.
We will.
We also have to some of the questions from the dugout.
Well, let's just think about this real quick. Who's your least favorite Mariner? Mine. Let's go with least.
Well, who
Mariner.
was just not clutch?
So I mean, least favorite Mariner. This could be a long list. I mean, mine. One of them is Sean Figgins because he came to.
Easily.
We got Sean Figgins and he came to the squad with high expectations. It's kind of like the old Mariners of trying to sign that big name guy and not like develop prospects. I don't know what the heck did we get. I don't know how we got him, if it was from a trade or if it was from free agency or whatever, but obviously that guy was just an extreme bust and he always kicked our ass when he was playing against us on the Angels, but comes to Seattle and then just tanks. And thanks a lot, buddy. I forget how long he was with us. It was a stint, maybe a little bit longer.
We've paid him a lot of money.
Yeah. So we paid him a good amount of money for a good amount of nothing, and appreciate that, Sean. Hope you're doing well. What about you guys?
I honestly I didn't know who that was.
Sean
Maybe-
Figgins?
I would go with
No.
for me it'd probably be Jesus Montero, just because.
Oh yeah.
Remember I think we traded Michael Pineda for him, and we needed like that next power slugger in the lineup, and all the great reviews and articles were saying, "Oh, this is the next big, power hitter." And the guy never. I don't know if we just called him up too soon, but he just flat out just did not come to play and just shit the bed and just. He got butts for steroids too. So
Great.
come on, man, great example. And
I now know actually who my least favorite Mariner is, and I should have thought of this up the roll of tip of the tongue right away. Dustin Ackley. I absolutely hated Dustin Ackley. We drafted.
That's a name that I tried to forget. Whenever he showed up, he just like that he's gonna pop out or some bullshit.
I hated Dustin Ackley. I remember we drafted him before Mike Trout, so that was tight. Him and Kyle Seager were teammates on North Carolina, actually. Fun fact there, Kyle Seager, I believe teammates. I know they both went to North Carolina, Tar Heels. Dustin Ackley,
number
man.
2 pick. Yeah,
I remember my brother and his girlfriend at the time were like in like Nashville and they're at like a minor league game and all of a sudden Pat's telling me next up to bat is Dustin Ackley, and he's like, no way am I seeing Dustin Ackley. Like, this is years after he was with us. He's seeing Dustin Ackley in the minor leagues. It's like, oh, back where you belong.
Was he a utility player? I think he was outfield.
He played some. I think he played.
He started out as a second baseman, and then he couldn't handle that, and so
he couldn't handle anything.
They tried to move him to the outfield, and he had that one. He robbed somebody from the New York Mets. I think it was in 2014. Like he showed a little athleticism. Like he barely got over the wall, and just it's like the most Dustin Ackley way of robbing a home run, and so.
Just like extremely unathletic, but for him it was like.
And then he tried to grow he tried to go different trends. Remember he had like the fat ass beard, and then he'd shave it off another day, and the guy could just not stay consistent at all.
He had to shave that when we gave him to New York, right?
Yeah, that's a rule with the Yankees. Johnny Damon, remember he had that fat beard with the Red Sox.
Oh yeah,
he had to shave it off immediately.
Yeah, that's one rule that they got there. Gosh, man, that guy. Yeah, there's the answer for that would be Dustin Ackley. That one easily. Sean Figgins.
We can
a close
reach
second.
Consensus on that.
Yeah, reach a consensus. Least favorite Mariner of all time. Welcome to the list. Taking the crown, Mr. Dustin Ackley. Yes. I hope you're doing well, man. You didn't do anything for us, but we don't hate you for it. Just didn't like you when you were on the squad. But hope you're doing well, I guess.
What other questions do we have?
Is Felix the Hall of Famer? Yes, without a doubt. I
had this question the other day too.
Yeah. I mean, he's a Hall of Famer. And he pitched a perfect game. And and
he was consistent but I understand why that question is asked.
I do too.
you know, I mean, you think about Griffey too, but you know, he's a different example. But again, that guy didn't walk away with a ring, and
No.
most Hall of Famers, you know, an ideal piece of criteria is you have at least one ring. But
Yeah.
What did Felix even see the playoffs?
Nope.
No.
That's when I see like
Yeah.
that.
But like when
That's
he
not his
pitched
fault.
during those years of his prime, remember they would win by like, or they would lose by like 1 or 2 runs, and Felix was always keeping him in the game. But the joke was
sure.
always, man,
Yeah.
we can't give Felix any run support.
You guys, his perfect game. The score is 1-0.
He won the Cy Young with I think a losing record because his ERA was so good, and
It just wasn't his fault.
Yeah.
Whoa! I didn't know this. He won the Cy Young with a losing record.
Yeah.
I didn't know that either.
I think. Let me. I know he didn't have the best.
Make a call to the pen, Evan. Check the
call to the pen.
websites. Call to the pen. Did Felix win the Cy Young with a losing record?
That can't be accurate.
That could be accurate.
No,
could be
no.
accurate.
I just
No,
remember the
dude.
Mariners had some bad stretch, and the joke was always like they can't give him any offense, and so he
I
did the best
recall.
he could. Cy Young stats. Let's see.
That would have to be a first, right? Like
13 and 12. 13 and 12.
Oh,
Barely. He had a
That blows my
2.27
mind,
ERA, pitched 249 innings. Yeah.
We got time for maybe one more question.
It's can we expect the Mariners to make the playoffs? Like, how long is it going to take?
I'm putting my money on next year. We will be in the playoffs, and this will be a question actually that will be further answered when we interview Joe Doyle, because the Mariners, their farm team, in terms of the separation that they have against the rest of the AL West, they have the most separation in terms of their farm team being the best in their division amongst the entire MLB. Okay, so if that makes sense, does that kind of make sense there? Where so like our prospects, the depth that we have is so much better and further than the rest of our division. That's going to be a huge point for us moving forward as a team and as an organization. And so this year, of course, we know we're going to hope for the playoffs, and I want it so bad more than anything. Realistically, I'm putting all my chips on next year that we will be in the playoffs. And Jerry came here in 2015 with a 5 to 6 year plan. He is in year 6. Starting this year. And so that's where, we're going to get Jared. We're going to see him. We're going to see Logan Gilbert. And as long as we can stay healthy and these guys can continue the development, the plan that Jerry has is going to be next year. And so we got to take into account for COVID last year being a shortened season and taking a step back. So that's why, this year was the high hopes, but we didn't get that full development with the minor leaguers. So next year, they're going to get that development this year. So next year is where I'm putting all my chips.
I got to give it another 2 years, because I think and I keep thinking about, we discussed this with Jesse too, but, Dave Sims had mentioned, look, we have a lot of talent, but at the end of the day, right? There were a lot of exciting moments by these young guys. But what was it? Evan White finished with a 1-something batting average. We're hyped on these guys, but they need experience.
Yes.
And I think, with a whole new group of guys that we're cultivating right now, it's still going to take some time for them to adapt. Unless, 90% of them have this God-given ability just to be able to stack up to other professionals in the league. So
So one thing I want to say on that topic, kind of, Max, normally when a prospect, a very highly thought of prospect is coming up to the MLB, there's that transition period, right? From the minor leagues, they gotta get comfortable in the MLB, right? They gotta transition, and
Right.
Normally they're doing that by themselves. But their Mariners, the way that we have it set up, we're kind of coming up in groups here. And so these guys aren't coming to the major leagues by themselves. They're coming up in groups and amongst the people that they've been working with together the entirety of their development. And they've been growing together with the camaraderie, the units that they are. And so that's going to be something that isn't really measurable, right? You can't measure that statistic, and I'm not saying it's going to make a difference, but it has the potential to make a much bigger difference and impact for these guys when they're coming up, that they came up together and they could then, just kind of transition a bit easier and a bit quicker than a normal prospect coming up by themselves.
So your argument is saying that they're going to have an advantage by just being younger
together
on the same level.
Yes, because they're molding themselves together
in age and
exactly. And it's just going to be, like they're going through the growing pains together. If you're going through growing pains by yourself, it can be a bit tougher to overcome those growing pains. And if Jared Kellnick has not really ever had a stretch where he's struggled. I was listening to a podcast or reading something saying like the biggest stretch of no hits he had was like 10 games. And like, that's really not that bad. And so he's never gone through a point in his career where he's struggled immensely. So that's going to be a hurdle he's going to personally have to overcome. But overcoming that hurdle, maybe there's another guy that's struggling at the same time. Obviously, we don't want that from a fan's perspective, but two guys going through it together. It's got to have some sort of weight behind that, in my opinion.
Yeah. Hey, Joe. How's it going, man?
Guys? How you doing?
Not too bad. How are you doing? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you guys too.
What are you up to these days?
Just writing, man. Same old.
Yeah.
First thing I got to ask, Joe, Evan and I here both went to Wazoo. You graduated at Edward R. Murrow College of Communications?
I did.
Yes, sir. Go Cougs, man.
2012.
Oh, right on.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, yeah, man, appreciate you hopping on the show today. Really excited to kind of pick your brain. First and foremost, I mean, you're writer at Lookout Landing, Prospects Live, former scout. I mean, could you kind of, just introduce yourself to the listeners, kind of let them know, a little bit about you?
Yeah. So my name is Joe. I am the director of MLB draft content over at Prospects Live and a staff writer over at Lookout Landing. And then I also do some work as the beat writer for MLB The Show over at Operation Sports.
Nice. How'd you get into baseball?
I played it all growing up. I played it up until high school. And at that point, I was just a little bit too small to continue competitively playing. I think it's the same story that a lot of people have. And then it's been a passion of mine since I was so young, and staying in the industry as a writer just seemed like something that really fit me. And I've always really been really passionate about the development side of things, the scouting and player development side of things. So that's kind of how I got into this nook.
Yeah.
You got a favorite team?
Oh, Seattle. I mean,
Kidding.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up here. I still live here. I never left. I haven't relocated at any point. So still a Mariner fan, despite it all.
Yeah, no kidding. Exactly. In your line of work, though, I mean, do you ever find yourself having, obviously, we're planning on asking you questions on just like your line of work and from the perspective of being a scout and kind of having your pulse on the baseball industry, like, do you ever find yourself having bias towards the M's, or, I'm curious, like, how often the Mariners end up coming up in your, scope of view, if you will?
Yeah. I mean, I really got invested in this industry through the Mariners minor league system. And that really started in about 2012, maybe 2011. And so I've been in the Mariners minor league writing side of things for most of that time. And then in 2018, I really started to get into the draft. I was always really, really passionate about the draft. I found it fascinating, even though it's not as, mainstream, if you will. But I just decided in 2018, I would start writing about it after, really enjoying. I've really loved just following the draft for 15 or 20 years.
So on the subject of the draft, I mean, in terms of every other sport, the MLB draft has got to be the toughest. I believe I'm still correct in this stat that the only number one draft pick in history to ever make the Hall of Fame is Ken Griffey Jr. And so for that to be, the case, walk us through like how difficult it is prepping for a draft or trying to predict a draft, because it's in the MLB, a guy can be drafted in the first round and never even play in the league.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think the Major League Baseball draft is a little bit tougher to forecast and predict than the NFL draft or the NBA draft, for example. But I think it has some of the same characteristics of those drafts. I mean, the guys drafted in the first round are still going to be the guys that generally have the most success at the next level. And there's a huge drop off generally from the 5 spot to the 10 spot to the 15 spot. I mean, that's gradual as well. But I think the challenging thing when it comes to scouting and evaluating for the MLB draft is there's not as much coverage. It's not as easy to come up. You know, if you want to go watch highlights for Lehigh baseball, like that's hard. It's really hard to go do. There's so many rounds. There's you know, high school baseball comes into play, and getting footage of high school baseball is often very reliant on relationships. So in that regard, it's the same as the NFL and NBA, but there's so much more that you have to have your pulse on.
Yeah. We just got off another call with a gentleman that is the director of analytics for the Mariners, Jesse Smith.
I know Jesse.
Yeah.
I talked to Jesse. Yeah.
We just got off the call with them, and you know, we had a great conversation about, you know, given we'll call it the Moneyball era, right, where analytics are driving a lot of these decisions. I mean, you know, that's roughly around the time that you kind of got up and running with your own career. How much I'm curious. Also, it's a relatively new school of thought, is what we said earlier. I'm curious, does that play a large role in what you do? And perhaps, you know, take what Chris just said about the only number 1 overall draft pick, Ken Griffey Jr. is the only Hall of Famer, right? Do you think more reliance on data and statistics and predictions is going to, you know, change that outcome? Like when you're looking at or when you looked at players scouting wise?
I don't think money or finances is going to come into it, but as far as what I think you're talking about with sabermetrics and just you know, quantifiable, measurable physical traits of players, I think that's going to come into play. You know, max exit velocity is kind of, you know, the tip of the iceberg, but when you look into things like biomechanical data, I think that's going to be kind of the next frontier as it pertains to K vests, kinetic energy vests, being able to tell you how much energy someone's torso is able to produce through a swing at a young age. You know, things like that, blast motion, just these different pieces of technology that kind of shows what a player is optimally capable of. I think that's going to have an impact at the top of the draft, but you know, we're going on 40 to 50 years of the MLB draft, and it still hasn't gotten any more. It's just tough to predict. I mean, the thing about baseball is you don't have to just be physically talented. You have to be, you know, 80 grade between the ears. You got to be able to adapt. You got to be able to handle failure. You got to be able to, you know, I guess there's just so many intricacies to baseball outside of the physical tools that a player needs, that I think at the end of the day, that's always going to be something that holds players up and scouts up from being able to hit it 100% of the time.
Kind of like, you know, like how mentally strong are they, or how much, what are they bringing to the clubhouse in their day-to-day work ethic and stuff like that?
So the example that I like to use is Jared Kellnick. Jared Kellnick, because you guys are Seattle fans. Kellnick comes from a background in Wisconsin where he had everything. I mean, his dad built academies, his dad built facilities. He had anything and everything he ever needed. His mom is a physical trainer. I mean, they eat healthy. He comes from as rock solid a background as you could. So all growing up, he always had it. I don't want to say spoon fed, but he always had what he needed to succeed, right? So he gets to the minor leagues. He gets drafted high. He gets to the minor leagues. He performs and he's performed and he's performed. Jared has never failed. Jared has never struggled. There's been a 2-week stretch when he went from high A to double A where he sputtered. You know, he hit like 230, but what's Jared Kellnick going to do when he struggles for 2 months? How does he adapt? How does he pull himself out of that hole? And that is the sort of thing that's really difficult to measure in a player, because when you talk to Jared, it's just, you know, laser focused. This guy is going to run through a brick wall to succeed. Well, he hasn't been faced with that brick wall. So we don't know what's going to happen. So it's just things like that I think are tricky.
How often do you, I mean, in your experience, how often do you run into situations like that where you're looking at an individual and they do have a rock solid background such as Jared's, and I mean, is there like an anecdote in which you can think of a scenario where someone like that gets brought up to the bigs and runs into that brick wall, and maybe some don't perform and some do? I mean, what have you seen?
I mean, I won't say anything about any specific players. I mean, there are players
Sure.
that obviously, haven't had the mental fortitude to make it at the big league level. But I look at last year's draft and I look at this year's draft, and there are players in this year's draft that, I've interviewed 70 of them. I've talked to these guys a lot over the last year. There are guys that I just know if they're drafted into certain markets with certain media markets, they just won't make it. I mean, they'll just get cut up and splayed. So in that regard, players matching up with a front office or a player development system and even a media market, I think has its benefits.
Right.
So with that, what's your thoughts on the Mariners system and organizational wise, and how Jerry's kind of going about that and developing these guys? What do you think our advantages are over the other teams? Start specifically, I guess, in the West.
I mean, I can't speak for other player development systems, but I am intimately, I'm aware of what's going on in the Seattle system. And I think the lines of communication being the same from the top down, I think is really important. If you have that same bit of messaging and that same kind of common goal for a player from the time they're 18 to the time they're 23, it really avoids some of the hurdles of, let's say, here's an example. We'll use Jared again. Let's say Jared was in high A. It was just learn how to hit a curveball, learn how to hit a curveball. Like, that's all you got to do. When you hit a curveball, we'll send you up to AA.
Right.
Well, let's say they get to AA and all of a sudden that coach says, I don't want you swinging at curveballs. Do not swing at a curveball. You never swing at curveball, only swing at fastballs. Well, then Jared's like, okay, I know how to hit a curveball. I know what I'm looking for in a curveball, but I'm getting lambasted by my coaches for swinging at curveballs. That's not what it's like in the Seattle system. It's a common message from the top all the way down to the bottom. And what that allows is the coaches are using the same speak. You're trying to accomplish the same goals at different levels, just with little tweaks. And I think what it does is it allows the players not to get confused and not to fall off course. And there are other organizations that don't do that quite as well as Seattle.
What about the old Mariners in the Jack Z era? Did you notice an immense difference?
Honestly, the thing about the Jack Z era, and I've said this before on different podcasts, is I think a lot of it had to do with bad luck more than anything. The Jack Z era drafted high just about every year. You look back at, Mike Zunino and Dustin Ackley and Danny Holtzen and, all of these players, DJ Peterson, Alex Jackson, all of these players were industry renowned. I mean, you can argue all you want about, why didn't they take Anthony Rendon over this player? At the end of the day, every player that Seattle selected in that gap was beloved by the industry. The problem is somewhere along the lines, they either got hurt or Seattle failed them, but the talent was there. So, failure in terms of getting a player from the draft at the big league level, it doesn't just, it's not on scouting. It's not like we drafted busts. Seattle wasn't able to develop their talent and get them in a position to succeed.
And that's interesting to hear you say that. So what you're suggesting really is just, all the pieces were there, but in essence, the machine didn't, I guess the right parts were in the wrong places or something to that extent.
Yeah. I mean, it's a number of things. Dustin Ackley should have been a good hitter. Right. I mean, there's no way around it. He hit 330 everywhere he went. And then he got promoted. And I think personally, the hitting coaches failed him. His feet failed him with the bone spurs. And he was never able to here's a perfect example. He was never able to get out of his own head. Mike Zunino was up way too early, and he was up because Miguel Olivo was, absolutely awful at the time, and it was a ticket sales boon. He should have been in the minor leagues for at least another entire year.
Dustin Ackley.
No, Mike
no,
Z.
that's Mike Z.
Mike Z, okay.
Mike Z should have been in Double A for at least another year. And you just kind of go down the line, like Danny Holtzen blowing out his shoulder, James Paxton taking as long as he did, but he worked out. DJ Peterson getting hit in the face with a fly ball. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But at some point, as they get to the big league level, it has to be, okay, what are the coaches in Seattle not doing to equip these guys for success? Some of the guys, like, Alex Jackson, DJ Peterson, some of these guys were bound to be failures just because of the types of people that they are. They struggled. But I will take to my grave that Dustin Ackley should have been a good big league hitter, and the organization failed him.
I love hearing you say this, because we did something on our show we have called Questions from the Dugout, and one of the questions was, who's your least favorite Mariner of all time? And right before we hopped on this interview with you, we were recording that, and we brought up Dustin Ackley, and just didn't really know the background, right? And it's going to be funny for our listeners kind of hearing you have his back after we had just kind of said, like, we just didn't like him as a Mariner because he never produced. But then, we don't think about that background music of what were the coaches doing at that time to help them develop. Maybe they weren't doing much. And
the really thing that makes us salty about the situation, again, because as to Joe's point, right, this Dustin Ackley guy, we drafted ahead of Mike Trout, and he was supposed to produce, I think, in tandem with expectations to what he actually produced, right? Which is, it could be like a relevant kind of scenario in which we can have a conversation about what the Mariners are currently dealing with, right? We have a lot of promising young talent, but at the end of the day, how many of them will actively produce? So food for thought.
I mean, that's always the question. I will say this, just because I like to get this point in whenever I can. Mike Trout, and this is a big draft nugget for you guys. Mike Trout is always the guy that gets brought up, like, 24 teams missed with Mike Trout. We, Dustin Ackley was selected before Mike Trout, and so were 23 other guys. Mm-hmm. But there were only, if my mind serves me right, there were 3 or 4 cross checkers, and that's the level above the area scout, that went and saw Mike Trout. So realistically, of the 25 teams that drafted, in that Mike Trout area, really only 4 of them were going to actually pull the trigger on Mike Trout. And I think the A's were one, the White Sox were one, the Angels were one, and I don't remember the other one, but Seattle was never really in play for Mike Trout, because he's in cold weather ball in New Jersey. It was never going to happen.
So 50% chance, though, he was going to be playing against us in our division.
Hey man, that's the thing about scouting, right?
Yeah.
Mike Trout was amazing. He played for a small podunk, snowy, cold weather high school. Never got on the premier showcase circuit, and because of that, nobody had seen him.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. I had actually wanted to ask you a question about sticking with the draft within the Mariners organization regarding Kyle Lewis. When the M's took him with the 11th pick, it seemed like the M's are really hyped and they kind of got a steal. Do you think Kyle Lewis? Why do you think he fell to number 11, or where was his like draft profile going in there? Because it's kind of cool to see him now flourishing, and I just know the Mariners were really hyped when they drafted him.
Yeah, I mean, I remember 7 weeks before that draft, there were talks of Kyle Lewis going 1-1. I mean, there was legitimate talk of him being the number 1 pick in that draft. Why he fell? Well, the 4 to 6 weeks leading up to the draft, he didn't hit for as much power as you'd like. Scouts went to his batting practices, and he didn't hit for as much power as you'd like. The hit tool was something that scouts worried about with the swing, because it was really handsy. It was really loud at the plate. So scouts were wondering whether or not that swing was, it was, people thought it was going to have to be entirely rebuilt because it was so loud. And for one reason or another, he fell a long ways into Seattle's lap. Lewis is interesting to me because on one hand, I'm like, okay, he's 24 and he has never performed like he performed last year, and he regressed the last month of the season. Mm-hmm. So should we expect regression? And then on the other hand, I'm like, okay, well, he's 24, but he just started playing baseball when he was like 17 or 18, like 15 or 16. He hasn't really been playing it his whole life.
I did not know this.
I didn't
Yeah,
either.
he didn't start playing baseball until I believe he was in 10th grade. I want to say 9th or 10th grade. And then he gets to Mercer. He's barely been playing baseball at that point. And then he gets to Seattle, blows out his knee. I just wonder how much of it is expected regression and how much of it is, this guy's still just figuring out who he is as a baseball player. So the gap there, like the margin for what he could be is just fascinating to me. It could go so many directions.
That's awesome. Well, the question I'm sure you've gotten a million times, but over Jared and Julio, who are you most excited about?
I'm excited about Julio. I'm excited about Julio because I think he has a superstar quality about him. Who do I think is going to have a better career? I think Jared. I'll say this. One thing about Jared that I find fascinating is I think he's going to work his way into being an average runner with like 70 power. Like, I think he's going to end up being a guy that really doesn't, I'm saying like by the time he's 26 or 27, I don't think Jared's going to be stealing bases anymore. I mean, he might steal you like, 8 to 10 a year, but I think he's going to be like a 35 home run guy. Just the way that his body is built. So
it's interesting because Chris and I sat down and watched one of those like a full 9 innings.
It was a game against the White Sox.
It was a game against the White Sox, and we had a buddy over also that asked us, do you? And it was kind of a random question, but it was like, do you see Jared Kellnick? Was it Jared that? Do you see Jared being in the bigs by 2025 or 2026? And we kind of looked at it and it was like,
no. It was Evan. He was asking about Evan White.
Oh, Evan White.
And the way he was phrasing it is, do you see him going back down to the minors because of his bat?
Yeah, Joe, what's your take on that? Evan White, I mean, he was another example of a promising guy, struggled in last season. What's your take on him?
I think Evan's going to be fine. I think you might see more struggles in April and May. Yeah. I don't think you're going to see like 188 struggles, but I do think, Evan White might be a 230 hitter up until May, but I think there's going to be a point in, early July, August where it just clicks for him because Evan's actually always been a hit over power prospect in the minors. Yeah. And he just started tapping into that power in 2019 when he got called or when he got, signed to that deal for 2020. Mm-hmm. So I think Evan's going to be fine. The glove is too valuable to send down. I mean, you are losing baseball games by putting Jose Marmolejos at first base over Evan White.
Yep.
So I think, it's going to take some time, and he's on an incredibly team-friendly deal. I think Evan's going to find himself buoying somewhere in that 255 range, but I think he's got 30 home run power. So
yeah, that's what I was telling your buddy Alex Max. Like I felt extremely confident he was not going anywhere, and I said kind of the same thing. It's his glove is so valuable, you can't replace that. And like he was saying in an interview, he had never swung and missed so much as he did last year. And I mean, he had never taken a bat in AAA. He went straight from 2A
voice of frustration
to the majors. There. Yeah, it's the voice of frustration. Yeah. But you also got to understand, it's 62 games or whatever it was last year, and he's still going to have his growing pains. But I think that he's going to be able to grow through them.
He's young too. I mean, don't forget he's 23. Like maybe 24 this year. Give him a chance to get his feet wet, because like you said, going from AA to the big leagues and then expecting someone to perform kind of unrealistic. I mean, his first game, he never went to AAA, and you got to face Justin Verlander in your first game. Like, come on.
Well, what's the thinking behind that? With all the young talent that we have, like, is there kind of a scenario in which we're shooting ourselves in the foot by bringing up these guys too young?
I don't think so with Evan, personally. And I think the deal that they signed him to was a good one. He's proven that he, let's say, for example, you bring up Kyle Lewis in 2019 for the last month of the season. Mm-hmm. Kyle Lewis was going to be given a he was going to be given a 40-man roster spot no matter what. So he was going to be up. The next wave was here. Evan White was probably going to join the Mariners at some point in May or June of 2020. So all you really did was you paid for 2 years of his arbitration to get a really good team-friendly deal and just said, hey, go struggle at the big league level a little bit. And I know that sounds simple, but this isn't the type of situation where it's like with Mike Zunino. When you brought Mike Zunino up, being a big league catcher is so much more than being able to hit. And that's why Mike Zunino failed. I mean, he hadn't even seen a big league breaking ball when they brought him up. And
couldn't hit
the slider low and away, he never
every time. No,
never stood a chance.
One thing I'm curious is, what do you think the benefit is if you think that there is, of all of our young kind of players coming up, not necessarily alone by themselves in transitioning from the minors to an MLB level style of play? What kind of benefit do you think it has for them kind of coming up group by group, not being by themselves? As a lot of superstars get brought up, and if they struggle, they're alone. It's got to be tough. So what are your thoughts around that?
I've never really given it any thoughts as like pros and cons, but I do like it because it's the first time in my memory that I can remember the Mariners bringing up prospects that were at the same levels at the same time. And I actually think sending Justice Sheffield down to AA in 2019 did him a lot of good because, he was with Kyle Lewis, he was with Evan White, he was with Justin Dunn, he was in the trenches with those guys. So, I think there's definitely value. I think, having the same guys around you at the same time with the common goal, winning at whatever level that is, has its benefits, because in AA 2019, Arkansas had a really, really good season. So, and Logan Gilbert should be up here soon this year for the Mariners, and he's part of that crew as well.
Right.
So who are some of the other prospects besides, most of the Mariner fans are familiar with Logan and Jared and Julio, but who are some of the other high names that you're high on?
So I'm really high on Levi Stout, who
Interesting.
Yeah, he's a right-handed pitcher out of Lehigh. I mentioned Lehigh earlier for the MLB draft. Yeah. I mean, that's a perfect example. It's a very, very small school, but he's a right-handed pitcher. I think he's got a legitimate chance to be a starting pitcher, which people take for granted. Like, for example, you look at someone like like LJ Newsome. I think LJ Newsome is not going to be a big league starting pitcher. He's going to fill a need, and he's going to end up being a long relief guy, but he's not a big league starting pitcher. Max Posey was another one. He was with the Mariners for a while. Not a big league starting pitcher. He's got 2+ pitches. So in that regard, I like Levi Stout. Great changeup, good curveball, good fastball. He's one to watch. A couple of the guys that I want to go a little bit lower on, I think Austin Shenton is a really fascinating guy because I don't know what position he's going to play. I don't know if he's going to be a second baseman or a first baseman or a third baseman, but he can hit the ball. He's got a good power tool, so we'll see about that one. I tell you what, the one last guy that I'll bring up that impressed me more than anyone during summer camp was Caden Polkovich, who was a 3rd-round pick for the Mariners this last year out of Oklahoma State. He looked fearless in the box. He looked like he could handle big league pitching. He can play center field. He can play second base, a little bit like Dylan Moore. So I'm really excited. I think he's going to be the second best prospect out of that draft class outside of Emerson Hancock.
I love that you brought up Dylan Moore. I told this to Dave Sims on an interview with him, but his first game in the league, I grew a strong hate for him, and that's a strong word, but 3 errors in a row, and he's totally flipped my switch, and I love the guy. I think he's got awesome power. I mean, what are your thoughts on him this year?
This is my first year playing fantasy baseball in my entire life, and I drafted Dylan Moore because I think I said at the end of 2020 that I wouldn't be shocked if Dylan Moore was the first Mariner in who knows how long to have 20 home runs and 20 stolen bases in the same season. All he has to do is get on base a little bit more. He's been that 200 to 225 hitter most of the time that he's been here. If Dylan Moore can find a way to be a 255 hitter and hit 20 home runs, he's going to be one of the most valuable utility men in the entire league. So the only shame is that it's clicked so late for him. I think he's 28 or 29 now. So he's Dylan Moore isn't going to get his first like contract until 33, which that's a bummer.
It's crazy.
Joe, we're coming up on time here in a little bit. One last question I had for you was just in essence, right? Like bringing this all back home. And, you know, if you've heard the first 2 episodes of this podcast, right, we're here because we're hungry for the playoffs, and you being a Mariner fan, I'm sure you're the same damn way. But in your eyes, what's it going to take for the M's to see games in October this year or, you know, next year? And how confident are you on where we're headed down that path?
Confident. I'm very confident in the players. I'm confident in the message. The prospects they tick every box. I saw an interesting nugget yesterday, and that was the last team with 3 starting pitchers and 3 outfielders in the top 100 at one time was the 2019 Chicago White Sox. And now they're going to be a playoff team.
Yeah.
Perennially.
Yeah.
What they did was they poured money into Dallas Keuchel. They poured money into different pieces that's, you know, work around the prospect base. That's what Seattle's going to have to do. I don't think Seattle is a Francisco Lindor away from going to the playoffs or a Trevor Story away from going to the playoffs. I think they're one trade deadline and one off season of adding 5 or 6 supplemental pieces to making this work. And one other thing that I would say, just because this is important, and it's important to brace yourselves as a Mariner fan, don't fall in love with the prospects because they're prospects, because what they are, and it sounds, you know, caveman like, they're assets. These top 6, top 100 prospects, I don't expect all of them to be Mariners at some point. They're going to get moved for, you know, like a Luis Castillo or a Herman Marquez. Like, they're going to be moved for big league ready players. So I would caution that, because I just don't want to see Twitter explode when George Kirby is traded for, you know, Noah Syndergaard or something like that. It's coming, it's going to happen, and it's part of the business.
That'd be a hell of a trade.
I think the Mets would do it. I mean, I don't know if they would do it right now, but he's going to be a free agent this year.
I mean, Jerry could work his magic again against the Mets. He knows how to do
I don't
it
know
once.
if the Mets want to go down that road after the Kellnick trade.
No, I don't know. I don't know about that one.
Well, one last guy I wanted to ask you about was Andres Munoz. I know he's now sidelined with an injury, but I know that I think I remember hearing that he was kind of related to, they related him to Edwin Diaz in terms of he's got that heater of an arm, and not necessarily maybe going to be that starter, but going to be kind of a closer role. What are your thoughts on him?
So yeah, I mean, Munoz is absolutely a closer. I have concerns about his arm action. I'll be interested to see if Seattle changes it up. It's pretty late when he plants his foot. So I'm going into the scouting thing, but yeah, I think with Munoz, you're talking about 102 mile an hour fastball. It's an 80 grade fastball. It's a great fastball. He doesn't have Edwin Diaz's slider yet. He doesn't have the command for it, but even if he's not a closer, like if he's a high leverage bullpen piece that you can control for 6 years, that's awesome. I mean, all you really need for him to be able to do is to get outs. Doesn't matter how he does it or where he does it or when he does it.
Yeah.
And when we're stacking up our infield with even if you just get it on the ground, I mean, there's a high chance that's getting out. Same with their outfield. They can cover a lot of ground. So
let me ask you guys this. I'll ask you a question. Jp Crawford, what do you do? What do you do with Jp Crawford after this year?
JP's bat has really got to come alive. Obviously,
that's my biggest concern as well.
Yeah, his bat's in a scary spot. He seems like he's smart in the box and he is looking at the right pitches, but in terms of producing, there's a lot that he's got to prove this year. His glove was outstanding, obviously, last year, getting the Gold Glove. I do love the move how we gave up Gene Segura for him and got him in return. He's younger, and then obviously got that Gold Glove for him, which is great. But his bat is, I mean, that's the big question mark that's got to get answered.
Mm-hmm. What's the situation on his contract if he has one? I mean, does he have? Is he a free agent next year?
No, he's controllable for 3 more years.
Okay.
Seattle controls him through 2023. So, I mean, he's got plenty of trade value.
Yeah,
if Seattle
exactly.
wanted to go that route.
If we wanted to use him for leverage, right?
But
Yeah.
where do you see the future of that shortstop position? Because they have Noelvi Marte. I think he's got a lot of talent, and Cesar's Torres Jr. Do you think those are trade bait, or do you think those could play for the Mariners?
I mean, I'm sure Seattle is kind of licking its chops to see what they can get done next offseason with all of these shortstops hitting the market.
Yeah.
You know, Lindor and Corey Seager, Trevor Story. I mean,
Right.
there's so much shortstop talent that's going to hit the free market next year. I would imagine Seattle wants one of them. If they don't end up getting one of them, I'm sure, you know, they go back to Jp Crawford. This is assuming Jp Crawford has a light year with the bat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then as far as Noelvi Marte goes, yeah, I mean, he's probably at least 2.5 years away. So maybe he ends up being trade bait, maybe not. But I don't think Noelvi Marte is a shortstop by the time he gets up to the big leagues. I think he's either a third baseman or they figure something out with him, but I don't think he's a shortstop.
Also, what about your thoughts then on JP? Or where do you think he'll?
I mean, I think, yeah, I just wanted to hear your guys' thoughts. I think there's a lot of pressure this year on his bat with such a massive market coming. And I'll be honest, he's disappointed me a little bit because he's got a frame that can add weight. He's got a frame that can add strength, and he hasn't come to camp yet the last 2 years as big as I would like to see him. So yeah, I don't know if he's ever going to provide the offensive punch that a team needs at the shortstop position to be a, you know, perennial championship team. But we'll see.
Well, yep, I agree. That's what we say every year, Joe. Listen, we're up on time. It's been a pleasure having you, and thanks for joining us. A lot of good insight. Appreciate you being here, Joe.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, guys. It was fun.
Yeah.
Of course, man.
you.
Appreciate you, Joe.
Take care of
All right.
yourself.
Go Cougs.
Yeah. You
Go
guys
M's.
too. Go Cougs.
Great interview there with honestly the both of them. Really cool to hear both sides of them. I mean, obviously Jesse coming from the analytical side and Joe coming from more of the minor league side, and hearing his thoughts. Some of those names I was completely unaware of.
Yep.
That he said. And so those are two we'll look into, and for you guys listening, we'll give you guys kind of some insight on who they are, where we got them, and trying to just kind of dive more into what Joe was trying to portray about them and what they can bring on. But yeah, all in all, great stuff. Great to talk with them.
Yeah. What was interesting, and you know, obviously for a guy like Jesse, I'm sure, you know, the conversation around maybe numbers would have been, you know, more up his alley, but you know, with talking with Joe, right? Like, he's seen a lot of people and he's seen a lot of things happen.
He said he had 70 interviews with the prospects that were drafted in this last draft.
That's 70.
Insane.
The other thing, because I mean, that guy knew his shit too. He was like, he had mentioned Kyle Lewis didn't start playing baseball until he was a teenager.
Dude, 15 or 16 years old, Kyle Lewis didn't start playing. That's incredible.
No shit.
That's incredible. And to see for him to, yeah, I mean, he kind of fell off a little bit. He still won Rookie of the Year, and he still, bottom line, he won Rookie of the Year last year. That just can't be forgotten and can't have that's got to have weight behind it in terms of who he is and what he is as a player. But insane that he didn't start until he was that age. I mean, God damn, I should have started at that age. No,
Yeah.
I didn't have the genetics. We all know that. I'm a generous. I like to say I'm a generous 5'9". I'm really 5'8", but I'll tell people I'm 5'9". He damn straight says 5'9" on my license.
I was, you know, for the listeners who give a shit, I was close to playing college ball for D3, but I just was too skinny, and my fastball didn't have enough juice in it. I didn't ask the curveball, but
yes, you did.
I did.
Yeah, baby.
You know this.
Oh, I do. I saw you.
Well, that's pretty much a wrap for this week's show, guys. Chris, why are we excited about next week's episode?
Next week's episode is going to be a fun one. We're going to obviously do questions from the dugout again, and appreciate the questions that were fed to us this week. It's fun engaging with the guys and the listeners, and guys and gals for that matter, even though no gals did respond to that. But that's okay. Gals, you are welcome. Please do. We want to, this is a show for everyone. Kids included. And even if you're about to hit your grave, you could send in some questions too. You might die tomorrow, but we'll answer it for you. We'll do you the courtesy. But Aaron Goldsmith, another voice of the Seattle Mariners, responded back to me via Twitter. That's been my direct source of reaching out to these guys. I'm just trying to blast them up on Twitter, and the Mariners organization's been awesome with getting us guys to come in or just to get on the show. I mean, we reached out to Dave, he came on, then Willie, he came on, and pretty much every person we've reached out to has been extremely open to coming on. And so that's been amazing. They're all awesome. And it was great to hear Jesse telling us that he had listened to our show to decide whether or not he wanted to come on, and he listened to it and he liked what he heard and he decided to come on. And so cool stuff. But yes, next week, Aaron Goldsmith, Goldie, the man, he shows so much excitement when there's a blast. And I love that side of him. It shows the passion behind what he's doing. And so fun stuff. We're excited for it. And Monday Mojo, recorded on Sunday, dropped on a Monday. Appreciate you guys.
EPUB, any last words for our listeners?
I just think that we keep growing each week with this show, and it's been a blast so far. I like also just being able to learn, new things each week. Joe Doyle, I think we didn't really know that much about Dustin Ackley and his development. And I really thought that was interesting to say that he'll go to his grave saying that the Mariners failed Dustin Ackley.
Yep.
We were ripping on the guy earlier in the show.
Yeah.
And then I didn't know Kyle Lewis didn't start playing baseball until late in high school. And so interesting. And I think, I want to give out a shout out to our listener in Canada, my grandma. She doesn't know anything about the Mariners, but she finds it really interesting to learn about this team, and we're doing a good job with it, So
that's our one listener.
We identified
Max.
That one listener.
It's his grandmother.
Yeah.
Yes, that's how
that's
how Monday Mojo has gone international. And for you listeners that did not see our Instagram post, fun stat that we found out, and this number could have changed. It could hasn't changed, gone up, but we have been listened to in 16 of the 50 states. That's pretty much a third of the states plus Canada. So thank you to everybody. I saw a listener in Alabama. Completely would never have expected
Texas,
that.
Arizona.
It's unreal. And so to every single one of you, I mean, that's awesome.
To the moon.
To the moon, baby, to the moon. We're boarding this rocket ship, and hopefully we're not talking you guys ear off. This is a long episode, but appreciate the hell out of you guys, and we'll see you next week.